Hey guys, happy Valentine's Day. So I thought that for Valentine's Day we'd do a killer couple. And for this episode we're gonna do the Ken and Barbie killers, which was Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. Paul was born on August 27, 1964 in Scarborough, Canada. And he, to all accounts, was very popular. He was a very good looking guy. He had a lot of friends, but he tended to have some already underlying tendencies, if you will. He was living with his mother and father, and his father was actually very abusive and kind of a creep himself. So his father was charged with molestation of girls and even charged with molestation of his own daughter. So he was already like, his stepfather was already a creep. And I say stepfather because Paul believed that this man was his father until he was 16 years old, when his mother told him that he actually wasn't his father, his biological father. And so Paul began to resent her, and he started calling her a whore and just like these horrible names and being very verbally abusive towards her. So then his mom started to be very depressed and, ashamed. So she actually went downstairs to go live in the basement of their home. So everybody knew Paul as like just a great guy, like a stand-up guy, but he was starting to kind of show more of his abusive side. So he liked to humiliate women in public. Sometimes even his own girlfriends from the past said that he tended to be very abusive, or that when it came to the sexual aspect of their relationship, that he would have these kind of weird fantasy, kind of abusive tendencies. So on the other hand, Karla Homolka was born May 4th, 1970 in Ontario, Canada. So she was younger than Paul, actually. And she was also very beautiful, and she seemed to have a normal childhood, like a very good upbringing. She lived with her parents and her other two sisters, and people described her as being popular, being friendly, pretty. People stated that she loved animals. She even ended up working at a veterinary clinic, which is actually, we'll get into that later, but it's actually where she started to get some of the drugs that she would use later on. And she kind of seemed to have a normal life. So because she liked animals so much, she went to a pet convention, and this is actually when she met Paul Bernardo. And she was at this restaurant with her friend when Paul and his friend kind of walked in, and the two were just immediately attracted to each other. Like, it was lust at first sight. And so Karla actually took Paul upstairs to her hotel room where the two of them had sex, and they kind of became infatuated with each other. Unlike a lot of the girlfriends that Paul had before, Karla seemed to, bring out the sexual deviant tendencies that he had before. So during this time, unbeknownst to Karla while they were together, Paul was actually later known as the Scarborough rapist. So he was getting more and more unable to control these sexual desires that he had, and he couldn't just fight it anymore. And I think that he had these tendencies within himself, but he very much enjoyed humiliating women and being very violent. So on May 4th, 1987, he raped a 27-year-old girl who was in front of her house because she had been locked out. Which is so sad. Imagine being the parents of that girl and then feeling like, well, we locked her out, and then this is, because she was locked out, somebody saw her and decided to rape her. So 10 days later, on May 14th, he raped a 19-year-old girl in the backyard of her house. And I don't know what it seems like he just was lurking around waiting to see if he saw some young girl somewhere and just took advantage. Like these two girls that he had raped in the span of 10 days apart from each other were outside of their houses, like right there about to go in, and then he just saw that opportunity and just acted. On December 16, 1987, he raped a 15-year-old girl, and the police actually ended up issuing a warrant to Scarborough residents, women specifically, to be careful, to not be alone, to not be out at night too late. So he kind of followed in the cycle. He raped and attempted to rape 11 more times to different victims, unfortunately. And then on May 26, 1990, he raped a 19-year-old girl who actually got away, and she got a good look at his face. And so she went and told the police what he looked like and kind of just gave them all the information about her assailant. The police ended up drawing up a sketch of this rapist. And so it wasn't until a few days later that they did a composite drawing and they let it out to the public. So what was curious about this is that it looked exactly like Paul Bernardo, to the point where even his close friends and people that knew him called the police and were like, hey, I think that this is this guy. So Paul was engaged to Karla, and they seemed to have a very good relationship, almost obsessively good. Like she was willing to do anything to make him happy, and they both seemed to be like this couple from hell, if you will. Like people describe them as just being completely infatuated with each other. I think it was the first time that Paul felt that he had a relationship that balanced him out. He had had other relationships, they just had not lasted as long as his relationship with Karla did. And I think that's because Karla kind of promoted these sick thoughts that he had, because, you know, I believe she had them herself as well, but we'll get into that later. So the two, like I said, were completely infatuated with each other. Karla's family actually really liked Paul. They thought she could not have gotten a better choice, and even though he was older than her family really loved him, and they thought that, you know, he would be a good husband. So when the pair got engaged, her family was very happy about it. They wanted Paul to be part of the family, and so everything was happening very quickly. So Paul started spending a lot of time with Karla's family, and that included her younger sister Tammy, who Paul kind of became infatuated with, and he had this sick like desire for Tammy because she was a virgin. And so somehow he convinced Karla that she should let him like rape her sister because she was a virgin, and that was something that Karla wasn't, and it wasn't something that she could give. So because she loved him so much, or, you know, just didn't want to lose him, she agreed to assault her sister. So this is where it gets to get very rough and very graphic. So I just want to prelude this with, if this type of conversation makes anybody uncomfortable. So on December 23rd, 1990, Karla was over at her parents' house, and her sister was there, and her sister was younger than them. And so she, you know, kind of very much thought of Paul as an older brother. She enjoyed being around his company, and Karla's. And so Karla decided to tell Tammy, hey, like, you know, we're just gonna drink tonight, like you should just hang out with us. And Karla had actually stolen some animal tranquilizers from her job that she had at the vet clinic. And so she ended up lacing Tammy's drink with these tranquilizers. And so Tammy ended up kind of passing out. She had mixed in her drink these tranquilizers, and she had had halothane in kind of a rag and put it over her face. So that, you know, she was still unconscious. And while this happened, Paul decided to record everything, and so he recorded himself raping Tammy as well as Karla raping her own sister. And that's so disgusting. Like, I mean, you should not rape anybody. Rape is just horrific, but raping your own sister, like, that just preludes how sick Karla was herself. But she allowed this to happen, and then Tammy started waking up, and she was kind of waking up dizzy and nauseous and throwing up, and so Karla and Paul got scared, so they tried to dress her very quickly, and she was not feeling well. She was throwing up, so they ended up taking her to the emergency room. And at this point, Tammy had chemical burns on her face. And so when they got to the hospital, they explained the chemical burns that Tammy had on her face as that she had fallen to the ground and she got these burns while they were trying to do CPR to save her. And actually, believe it or not, but the medical coroner ruled the death as an accidental death. Even though she had the substances in her body and even despite the chemical burns on her face. So the pair kind of just went on, and the family didn't suspect anything. And so on June 15th, 1991, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey was locked out of her house as well because she had missed her curfew. And so she was locked out and she was trying to call a friend. And that's where Paul Bernardo showed up, and he had offered cigarettes, and she went to his car, like to the window of his car. He was offering her cigarettes, and he forced her into his car and took her home. And so he brought her home, and he told Karla that he had another girl for them, and he kept her in their house for over 24 hours, and he recorded himself and Karla torturing her and raping her. It was just, so horrible and disgusting. There's conflicting stories on how Leslie died. Karla says that Paul strangled her to death, and Paul maintains that Karla killed her with medicine that she had taken from the veterinarian office. They dismembered her body because they figured it would be the easiest way to get rid of her body, so they did it with a saw. And then they put like pieces of her body in cement and just kind of threw it in Lake Gibson. And that just shows you how little remorse and just utter indifference to human life that they had, that they just took this girl, butchered her up, and then just threw her like she was nothing into the lake. And then it was then that somebody ended up finding her body, but nobody knew who was the actual killer. So at this point, Karla knows that Paul is a rapist, and she's actually participating in it herself. And this is where like the just morbid, disgusting facts of this case come along, is that Karla would pretend to be her sister Tammy, who had been murdered by Paul, and she would even put on her clothes when the two had sex and pretend that she was Tammy. And that's just so sick. Like, it just shows how disturbed Karla was herself and how sick Paul was. I mean, I don't justify what Paul was doing, but I feel like it's even worse what Karla was doing because it was her own sister. So on April 16th, 1992, Kristen French was taken forcibly on her way home, and she was kind of forced and coerced into the car by Karla and Paul. And they took her home, same thing, they kept her. I don't know if it was the weekend of Easter, but they kept her and they videotaped themselves raping her and torturing her. And she was also murdered. Her body was found on April 30th, 1992. And the worst part is that Karla and Paul murdered Kristen, and then they just, that same day they went to Easter dinner with Karla's family, like nothing had happened, like they had just not murdered like a little girl. And their state of mind was just, they thought that they were invincible, they could do anything, they weren't going to get caught, and that, you know, they could do whatever they wanted. So Karla and Paul's relationship was not very good. He started to abuse her himself, and he was hitting her, and then one night Karla was severely beaten by Paul. She had black eyes, like she just looked like she went through it, like he just beat the hell out of her. And so at first she didn't want to say anything, and then she went to work like normal and tried to play it off, but her coworkers just suspected something. So then Karla ended up filing a police report and stating that she was a battered wife and that her husband had beaten her up, which he had, don't get me wrong, he beat her up, but she was starting to play from this moment on like the super victim, like she was just in this horrible relationship and that nothing that happened afterwards was her fault. And so then police go to arrest Paul, and then he's let go. Okay. So they had actually had Paul's DNA, and they matched it to the Scarborough rapes that had happened. And so police start interrogating Karla, making it seem like it's about the abuse, and they were trying to play it off like that, but they actually had two of the detectives from the Scarborough rapes there. And so Karla started to panic, and then she ended up telling her aunt and uncle that Paul was the Scarborough rapist and that him and her had videotapes of raping these girls. So Karla told her aunt and uncle that there was a videotape or videotapes of the rape of Leslie and Kristen, and that, you know, Paul was a Scarborough rapist. And so on February 17th, 1992, Paul was arrested, and the court issued a search warrant on his house that actually lasted 71 days because Karla had admitted to that there were tapes and that there was evidence that Paul was raping these girls and that he was responsible for their murder. And so here's the thing. I think Karla knew where the tapes were because the search lasted 71 days and they could not find the tapes at all. So they were searching, there was nowhere to be found. So Karla ended up getting a lawyer, and she had a plea deal in exchange for her testimony against Paul Bernardo. And her deal was that if she testified, she would end up spending 12 years in prison. She knew she wasn't going to be able to get complete immunity because she was on tape and she was participant to the murders, but she would get 12 years. And with good behavior, she would be able to get out sooner than that, which is just horrific. Like, the fact that she even was allowed to get this deal is disgusting. Okay, so she ends up getting this deal for her testimony because the police really didn't have a case against Paul. They had not found the tapes yet, and so they were really just basing off this whole case on Karla's testimony. So they gave her the plea deal. So she accepts it, and she starts playing the victim, making it seem that Paul had forced her to participate in the rapes and murders, and that she was beaten by him, and that she was basically just a victim in all of this. So they go to trial on June 28th, and the Canadian court actually had decided that they were going to put a publication ban on this case, and that the ban limited details of the case to the public, and even the public was barred from the hearings. And so people really didn't know what was happening or had any details of the crime or how much Karla participated or didn't participate in. So the public really didn't know that much because of this ban. So the plea deal that Karla had made was made before tapes came into evidence. So eventually they found the tapes. And at this point, like I said, Karla's plea bargain was already put in. It was already, they couldn't go back on it. And so once they viewed these tapes, they realized that Karla enjoyed it, that in the tapes you could see that she was not forced into this. She was a willing participant and she enjoyed it just as much as Paul did. So on September 1st, 1995, Paul was convicted for all of his crimes, the rapes, the murder, and he was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole until he had served 25 years. So Paul, throughout the years, he was eligible for parole and they denied him, which, you know, he raped so many women and girls and he took lives. Like, he should not be eligible for parole. However, Karla, this is the most sick part of it all, is that Karla, because of her plea deal, ends up getting 12 years of prison sentence. She doesn't get life even though she was a willing participant. And I think that, you know, the court, the lawyers, everybody realized how bad of a decision it was to give her this plea deal after they saw the tapes. So actually her plea deal is known as one of the worst plea deals in Canadian history, and they called it the deal with the devil, because after the tapes were brought into evidence, they realized that Karla was just as sick and twisted as Paul, and she was actually enjoying this. On July 4th, 2005, Karla was released from prison. So here she is, she's living her free life. She was released from prison. She has now children. She's remarried. She actually remarried the brother of her lawyer. Basically, Karla blamed Paul for everything. And she said that everything was his idea, that he forced her. She basically played the victim the whole time. However, Paul has always maintained that Karla was the one who decided to kill these girls. He admitted to everything. He admitted to every single rape he committed, every single attempted rape he committed, and all his participation in the murders. But to this day, he remains that Karla was the one who planned the murders, from her job brought the medicine to drug these girls, and that she was just as a willing participant as him. He has even said that he was wanting to let the girls go. Like, he said that when he would kidnap these girls, yes, he raped them and he would record it and he would torture them, but he was gonna let them go. And it was Karla the whole time who decided that they should be murdered. He also has maintained that Karla was the one who had killed all the girls by, you know, the over medication, that she would give the sedatives. And Karla maintains that it was actually Paul who killed the girls by strangling them. And see, here's where I don't know. Okay, I think if Paul has admitted to everything, he's admitted to all the rapes, he's admitting to all his participation, he has not denied anything. He never has said, like, I didn't do this. Like, he has said that he raped all the girls, he admitted to all the rapes he committed as the Scarborough rapist. He has never denied any participation. Karla has maintained that she was just a victim in all of this, and I think that it's pretty obvious by the tapes that she was not a victim, that she was a willing participant. And I think, in my personal opinion, I think Karla is worse than Paul. I think Paul, yes, is a sick individual, but I think that Karla is sicker than him. I think that she is just as psychopathic. I believe that she enjoyed the rapes and the murders, and I do think that, you know, she did decide to murder these girls. I think that Paul has admitted to everything, and I don't see why he would all of a sudden say, oh, actually, no, I didn't do this part. So I think that Karla was just as sick as him. Alright guys, well happy Valentine's Day. That's end for this video. Let me know what you guys think about this Barbie and Ken killer couple, and let me know what you guys are doing for Valentine's Day.